Hey, welcome back to Two Ski Geeks, where we help you get your geek on. I'm your boy Will Call. Happy to be with you today. It is the Monday after Veterans Day holiday. So a shout out to all the veterans out there. Thank you for protecting our country and what you do every day uh, to make us to shine a setting example and shining a great example of what it is to be a great person in this country. Um, and giving us a country to call safe. Thank you for all that you do. Now, let's go into today's subject of Kung Fu comics, in particular, the Marvel books of Kung Fu, based on Kung Fu. The magazine's called The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. It was a 1970s magazine called The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And I recently came into or purchased a lot of those magazines for of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And they are really a backup to an omnibus that I bought of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu back in around 2016 or 17 or something of that time frame. But it was funny when I bought that omnibus at that time. I was living in Texas, and I didn't look for it. I didn't look through it for a couple of years, and it was funny when I finally looked when I looked through the book in the omnibus, and I was like, "Hey, this is all in black and white," and I had no idea, even though I'm a kid of the '70s and things of that nature, born in the late '60s. And of course, this book of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu came out in 1974, April of 1974 to be precise. And of course, kung fu movies were huge at that time with the TV show and all that stuff. And we'll talk about that later. But I was not aware of the fact that the magazine was not quite the same as the comic book, which was Master of Kung Fu or Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. And now, even though they had Shang-Chi in Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, and even he's on the cover of the omnibus, and the comic book was in color, but I didn't know the magazines were not, and that they were black and white. So I was shocked at that, and I was just like, did I buy something wrong? It's like, no, dummy, it is what it is. And so the magazines were printed in black and white, much like many of the magazines that Marvel printed at that time, uh, be it the horror magazines or Chillers and many other magazines. They printed magazines with the artwork in black and white. It was cheaper to do, um, and they'll call it given the excuse. Marvel would, and maybe some of the other magazines would give it the excuse of calling them coloring books so people could color into the artwork. And God forbid if persons did, I'm sure those books are pretty penny. They're worth pennies for sure. Now, people did use them for coloring books. Fortunately, the lot that I bought, they are not used for that purpose. But I wanted to share with you guys some of the folks, some of the content that I bought. So what we'll do first is look at the magazines, the individual magazines, and then I'll go through some of the content of what each magazine had. And of course, I'm not going to go through every magazine. I'm only going to go through issue one, but the give you a gist of what the magazine content was about. Just looking at the issue number one, and the contributors to the books, to the magazines, were amazing. They are amazing artists and writers that we've talked about over the years, and some you'll be familiar with, some you will not. But there are lots of great lessons in this. So without further delay, I will get into the magazines and show you what it is that we've got to show you. So I'm going to change to the document cam and show you what we've got on the documents here. So we got with number one, issue number one. The cover is painted and drawn and painted by Neil Adams, and we've talked about him. Of course, he's a long time workhorse, does beautiful work as you can see on the cover, but most known for Batman. But he also did most of the covers for all of the issues of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. I think he probably did, out of the 25 or 30 issues, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, how many issues of a magazine there are, but he probably did about 93 to 94% of the covers. So this is a Neil Adams cover of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu #1. And what you don't know, of course, this was inspired by Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee was huge at that time, and Bruce Lee had just died when this magazine came out. He died in early 1974 when this magazine came out. And so one of the articles in this magazine, and I'll show you from within the omnibus, there's an article on Bruce Lee with him and his life, a brief article, and with the sadness and noting the sad passing of Bruce Lee in 1974. So that's issue #1. And we got issue #2 here. And with Jim Kelly, one of the partners in the last Bruce Lee movie. I can't think of it. I want to say, oh, I can't. Don't get me wrong, because I don't want to piss people off who know the movies too well for Bruce Lee's movies. But it's the last Bruce Lee movie, and Jim Kelly is the brother here with the afro, with another kung fu character on the cover. But in this, we're highlighting Jim Lee, and I don't believe, no, that's also a Neil Adams cover as well. But anyway, then we got #4, and this issue has David Carradine's, or the TV show, from the TV show Kung Fu that was on ABC. And that's also discussed in issue #1 as I go through when I open up the omnibus and show you issue #1. But they talk about Kung Fu, the TV show, with David Carradine, is Wycon Chung Kang. I can't by Kane. Anyway, I'll call him Kane because for lack of my memory jacking up my tongue right now. But Kane was the main character called on the TV show Kung Fu. Alrighty, and so I won't keep talking myself in circles. I'll go to the next magazine cover, which is #8. Just beautiful covers, well done. Sadly, the only thing in the magazines are covered that are colored are the covers. And then we got #9, another great cover. 10 with Iron Fist on the cover. This is the key for Iron Fist. The first time Iron Fist is on the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And all of these these are not, I mean, I'm not going to call them, near mint, but they're, I would say, very fine, a very fine quality. I'm very fortunate with this lot of magazines that they came out so well as they did. Then we got this cover here with #11 with the character Billy Jack, and that was a movie back in the day. And Billy Jack was a huge character and movie from back in the early 70s. And if you do yourself a favor and look up some of those old movies from those fighting and fighter magazines, Billy Jack is one of those characters that was well known at that particular time. And then we've got #13, a Shang-Chi cover. Love that. And then #14, we got a Bruce Lee tribute cover here. Dragon Still Lives On is the name of the title of this one. I love this one. Okay, and then the super annual issue. And this cover is a Nick Cardy drawn and painted cover. Nick Cardy is the artist, not Neil Adams. And crazy part about it, so that's the same cover that I chose to purchase with my omnibus, and which we'll go over later on as I open up later on. But this is the same cover that the omnibus has. And I love this, that it matches this super annual issue. And it has a lot of great articles in this one. As I was doing the reading of the omnibus, there's a lot to be said about this, a lot of the articles in this magazine that they were very proud of in composing this super annual issue of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. I'm going to take this and move these away and make room for the next pile. So we got Chuck Norris on the cover of number 20. And this is number 21. Number 23. 24, beautiful cover. Another looks like Nick Cardy cover. Number 25. Gorgeous, just gorgeous work. And I must say, those magazines from the 70s, be they horror or whatever genre, these covers, the covers on these magazines from the early 70s are just plain gorgeous. Bruce Lee cover here on number 26. And of course, you all can already tell Bruce Lee is again another rendition, a rendering of Bruce Lee on number 28. 29, Iron Fist and Shang-Chi. And finally, and I'll move this magazine out of the way because it is not Kung Fu related, number 33. So those are the covers that I purchased in the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu magazine, and from the early 70s, from 1974 probably till about 76. Alrighty. And then let's go into the omnibus while I got you here. Over here, got you here. And as I said, this is a Nick Cardy cover, which is the same cover as the super annual issue, as you can see here. I just showed you the real super annual issue magazine. And so going inside the magazine, going into the omnibus, and I'm going to go to the very back and show you that the alternate cover for the omnibus is done by a new artist, not a new, but from the 2000s, Gabriel Dell'Otto, and we've talked about him on the show many times. But this is a Gabriel Dell'Otto cover, and this is the alternate cover for the omnibus, as opposed to the Nick Cardy cover for Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Alrighty, and this is omnibus, the first omnibus. There are two volumes. This is the first volume of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And you can begin to see some of the great persons who contributed to the magazine just here: Doug Mitch, Bill Mantlo, George Perez, Rudy Nebres, and Mike Vosberg. And then on this side, we have what one of the stories they were telling were the Sons of the Tiger, which is this is a pretty good storyline as well. Can't recall who this artist is on this for Iron Fist right now on the top of my head, but looking at the writers here and the contributors, the writers and the pencilers and the inkers for the magazine, and this is for all the years with all the writers and contributors within issue number 1 through issue number 18. But Steve Englehart, who we know for Captain America, Jim Starlin, who we know for Adam Warlock and tons of other things, and Thanos and many other characters. Lorraine Zenka Smith, I'm not familiar with her, but Denny O'Neil. And Denny O'Neil, if you can see right here, he's also known as Wan Chang O'Shaughnessy. Yes, that was another name for him to use while doing his Kung Fu writing And it was also, if you didn't know, Denny O'Neil also took martial arts lessons. And so I guess that was another pen name that he gave himself while taking martial arts lessons. But Juan Chang O'Shaughnessy, uh, Denny O'Neil, and Jim Dennis is another writer on this, and John Warner and Roy Thomas, Marv Wolfman. I mean, Jerry Conway with Spider-Man. There are tons and tons of different folks who contributed on the writing. George Perez was a writer. Archie Goodwin, Don McGregor, known for Black Panther. Uh, Tony Isabella, also known for Black Lightning. I mean, the list goes on and on. And then the artists again: Jim Starlin, Dick Giordano, Jim Sharp, Marie Severin. We talked about her. How much of a fantastic artist she was. Paul Gullacy, one of my favorite artists on the Shang-Chi comic book. Herb Trimpe, known for his work on the Hulk. John Buscema, known for Silver Surfer. Howard Chaykin. I'm trying to look. Keith Giffen. I didn't even know he was in this. Keith Giffen and Terry Austin. Man. And Keith Giffen, we just lost within the last month. He just recently passed. And he's also well known for his work on Justice League and Justice League Europe and creating the DC character Lobo. So Keith Giffen, a great one on this. And then we got artists, the inkers, Al Milgrom, Dick Giordano, Marie Severin. And then why I'm covering the inkers on this, because some of the Filipino inkers that came into the fold, if they're listed here, I know they've got to be Pablo Marcos, Mike Esposito. I need to put on my glasses so I can really see, as opposed to trying to struggle to see. And then we've got Rudy Nebres, Tony DeZuniga. These are just some of the great inkers that were part of this. So let's get into this first book, the number one magazine, or let me not get into the number one magazine, but let's first get into some of the intros. Tony Isabella, who I talked about, who did Black Panther. Tony Isabella was talking about, again, when we talked that this was a black and white book, which again, I didn't know. And they said that they're saying they predated the adult coloring book phase or craze by 4 decades, but people would color in themselves, and they also did it to save money. And also cash in on the Kung Fu movie craze. The Marvel also, is excited to put in a magazine for the Kung Fu movie craze. And so they mentioned, as I said, some of the other magazines that Marvel put out, some of the horror magazines, such as Dracula Lives and Monsters Unleashed and Tales of the Zombie. Those were books that became, or content that became part of some of Marvel's horror magazines. And they had content from the 50s and the 60s. But sadly, for the Kung Fu content, there was no content earlier for Kung Fu. Now, they did have some pretty, where is it over here? It's not over here, but they did, we'll talk about it later, but they did have some content regarding called Yellow Claw, which was based upon Fu Manchu. And it's kind of like a Chinese crime lord that it doesn't make well for it's kind of like has some racial overtones to it, where Chinese were known as bad guys at that time. And so in the 40s and the 50s, where they had Chinese as criminals. And so it just didn't bode well. But they wanted to use some of the material, but they did not, thankfully, do so. But anyway, I'm going into why I've highlighted some of these, or put a tag here. They talk about Bruce Lee coming in with the Enter the Dragon storyline, and he was such a huge icon. And he was the inspiration for the magazine and beginning the magazine. And then we're talking about Chris Claremont, known for the X-Men, Don McGregor, John Warner, uh, tons of different contributors to making the magazine, and then we're going into what I'm over here. Frank McLaughlin, also known for doing the Charlton magazine, the Charlton comic book called The Judo Master, and I'll pull up the picture of the Judo Master. But also, if you recall, in the TV show that DC put out, the Peacemaker TV show, they had the Judo Master in the Peacemaker show. So Frank McLaughlin was for Charlton, the creator of the Judo Master comic book, and he was a contributor as well to the Kung Fu, this Deadly Hands of Kung Fu book or magazine, I should say. And so Tony Isabella was serving as the editor of this magazine at the time with that great collection of artists and writers at the time. And so please forgive me with the phone ringing, please, guys. Regardless of that, we've got then the writer Jerry Conway, who was part of one of the writers of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And what's really cool about this, I highlighted this over here, is how he was influenced by going to see The Fist of Fury, the first Bruce Lee America, or the one that was first shown here in America in 1972, The Fist of Fury, which was on the other night, on Friday or Saturday night, which is one of the reasons why I was inspired to do this show. And watching The Fist of Fury, not to be confused with plural Fists of Fury, which was a different movie. But there is a Fist of Fury and Fists of Fury. So don't get it confused like I did when I sent the text out to folks saying Fists of Fury was on. No, it was the wrong thing. I had the wrong movie. So anyway, and this one here is what I'm talking about when they bring about talking about the Yellow Claw. And Yellow Claw, and I'll put the picture up in the edits as well. Yellow Claw was again based upon with the character Fu Manchu and a lot of racial negative stereotypes. But and Stan Lee wanted to use some of that material, probably to save money because it was written that they were rehashing and going to put into the comic books, but they decided against doing so. And then finally, last thing for intros is Doug Mensch, one of my favorite writers in the uh, Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu comic book. And I'll put that up as well in the edits with a cover with Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. But what he highlights and his contribution to the formation of Shang-Chi is that he highlights the Filipino artist, and this is where in this second one here in particular, but I'll just read what it says, why the Filipino artist and became a huge contributor to Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And it says, after U.S. forces helped the local resistance in the Philippines to liberate from the Japanese occupation, tons of American comic books were left behind to be scarfed up by Filipino kids. Totally hooked on American-style comics, these kids grew up to become Tony DeZuniga, Mr. Akala, Mr. Nino Redondo, Neighbors, Rudy Neighbors, as I mentioned before, and too many others to name here. But it was the Rudy Neighbors sample art that I immediately yanked down from the stack. Even as I gushed with wild enthusiasm, Marv Wolfman proved once again that he was not blind and could tell the beautiful art, telling me that Rudy was already inking beautiful work. That's cool. So what I didn't know until really reading and getting into this was the fact that how with the Filipino artists that came into the United States from the Filipino artists that came into the United States and contributed to lots of great artwork in comic books, not just for the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, but also to Batman magazines, to Batman comic books as well. And so Filipino contribution into magazines and artwork, it just can't be overstated. Okay, now let's going into issue number 1, and I'll try to make this brief and wrap this up quickly. Again, so we've already seen the cover of number 1. And this is what the magazine looks like literally inside, but it's just reproduced in the omnibus here. And the first story is done by Steve Englehart. Again, we talked about the writer on Captain America, with the art by Jim Starlin and Al Milgrom. And this story is, it's okay. Uh, it's more so uh, Shang-Chi, depicted here at the bottom and here on the side, and being tested by his father Fu Manchu. And again, if you look up some of the history of Fu Manchu and some of the racial stereotypes of it, be it opium dens and the crime piece associated with drugs in the early 20th century, and how Chinese people are connected with criminality, and there are all kinds of hero books written with Fu Manchu, including the old TV. I'm sorry, the old book. If I can find it real quick, um, The Shadow. The Shadow was also in usually in some type of hot contest of fighting and crime against Fu Manchu. So lots of work that was done back in those days in the 30s and 40s of criminalizing Chinese characters. So anyway, so this story was a decent story. It's not great. It's just a test, and the artwork is pretty decent by Jim Starlin. Not great, just decent. Um, and Steve Englehart, he tried, but it's not a great story. Maybe they get better. We'll have to see. I'll try to read more of this. But anyway, first magazine, and so then they cover, as I said before, Bruce Lee. And you'll find that Bruce Lee died here July 20th of 1974. And so this was their tribute to Bruce Lee and the inspiration that he gave to making this magazine and creating it and giving Marvel a chance to get in on the hype of kung fu movies. And so just different pictures of Bruce from his different movies that they cover, as well as the stories that talk about the inspiration of what his movies did and what drove folks to the theaters, as well as to different dojos, and how different tons and tons of dojos, martial arts dojos, were inspired and created with the influx of kung fu movies, as well as the the vastly popular character Bruce Lee. And the other thing I forgot to mention with Bruce Lee is the other character from the Green Hornet TV show. He played Kato. And I don't know if you guys ever saw that episode of Batman with Adam West and Burt Ward, and where Batman was fighting the Green Hornet and Robin was getting his patootie handed to him by Bruce Lee. Y'all know Burt Ward couldn't fight for the worth of diddly, period. And then he's gonna fight against Bruce Lee. Yeah, it was always help, Batman, help. It's just, I mean, just getting whooped. And I wanted to, besides patootie, I'm being kind. So anyway, this article here is done by Denny O'Neil and his Asian inspired pen name Wan Chang O'Shaughnessy. And I'm not sure if these are pictures of him or not, but he writes an article, uh, and they're showing different poses of martial art, and then they're talking about uh, kung fu movies. In this case, they did a review on the Five Fingers of Death, the movie Five Fingers of Death. So this is a straight kung fu movie review that they brought into, and real cool content from within the movie Five Fingers of Death, and shots from the movie that they took and added to the magazine. and then they wrap it up here with the Five Fingers of Death, and then they're talking about other films that they are recommending. What brought me, I highlighted this page because they talk about this other movie, because they were looking for movies that had Bruce Lee, other Chinese movies before some of the ones that came to America. So some of the early Chinese movies, uh, the second movie where he had his most time in front of the camera was called Infernal Street. And so this is where Bruce Lee is in it, and he has more than just a cameo. This one here is the Fist of Unicorn. Bruce Lee just barely shows up as a cameo, but in this other one, Infernal Street, has Bruce Lee more in it. I'll just read. There was no. Let me see here. It was like the second time with Infernal Street, starring Yu Tianlong, Chow Chen, and distributed by Frank Lee International Films. I'm sorry, I was wrong. There was no Bruce Lee in it, but there was a fine, entertaining film with some good, familiar people, fluid choreography, and fighting, even an interesting story motivated by opium addiction. And but the best of all was Yu Tian Lung. Yu Tian is quite young and a darn good fighter whose technique is so Bruce Lee stylized that at times I almost believed I was watching Bruce Lee at 17. So I'm sorry, no Bruce Lee in that one, but Bruce Lee inspired, or movie maybe that even inspired Bruce Lee. But Infernal Street. All right. Then they get into the TV show Kung Fu. And this story here on Kung Fu is a little more just telling what the story of Kung Fu as they introduced Kung Fu in 1972. ABC, the channel ABC created or debuted Kung Fu with a movie first called The Way of the Tiger, The Sign of the Dragon, the ABC Tuesday movie of the week, which in early 1972 served as a pilot film for the now popular TV series Kung Fu. So that was the original predecessor to the Kung Fu TV show, and of course the hero Kwai Chang Caine, which I was goofing up earlier in this broadcast. But sorry, I was messing up the name, but Kwai Chang Caine. And so this is more like a historical telling of the show and how it came about, the writers and why they brought it about, and the inspirations behind it. And then this one, written by Denny O'Neil or Wan Chang O'Shaughnessy, uh, this is a more negative story about Kung Fu, more so asking why, the why David Carradine, who I didn't know was a dancer, and he was selected to play Kwai Chang Caine. But of course, David Carradine was not Asian. They chose a white American to play Kwai Chang Caine, and so yeah, that was the critique of the Kung Fu TV show, and then some of the writing as well, being that it wasn't purely Chinese derived, and even though David Carradine stuck out like a sore thumb when he was around other Chinese plot or cast members, just could not be a Chinese person would not be allowed and selected to play the star of a kung fu movie, a Chinese movie at that time. Much like even the characters back in the 40s and the 50s, Mr. Moto and Charlie Chan were not played by Asian characters or Chinese characters back in the day, even though they were Chinese-based movies, but they had Europeans playing Chinese people at that time. And so this is a critique regarding Kung Fu, as well as the lack of fighting, of Kung Fu fighting. And so you just had these David Carradine just jumping through the air, or with a camera placed in a precise place to make it look like he's trying to perform Kung Fu, but really he's just either jumping off a trampoline or some crap like that and not really fighting, or holding a pose in the air, but not really no real kung fu involved in the show. So, but ABC, much like Marvel magazine, they capitalized on the hype of kung fu movies. And with me being a kid of the 70s, at that time, I loved it all at the same time. And I even though I didn't know any better, but we enjoyed the content that was placed in front of us, as well as the Saturday morning kung fu theater that people have loved, and even the rap group Wu-Tang and its rappers were inspired by kung fu theater. Okay, so I'm about to wrap it up. The Sons of the Tiger is the last story in the magazine, and it's done by Jerry Conway, and again, the writer on Spider-Man for many years, and he was the one also who created the character the Punisher. Uh, Jerry Conway is still alive and making and writing on Spider-Man. He on occasion he'll still write. And the artist, the wonderful artist, Dick Giordano. Um, Dick Giordano is mostly known for Batman, his work on Batman, but his artwork in this one, I will say, and this it surpasses the artwork that was done by Jim Starlin. Sorry, Jim, and you're good people, and I love you, but Dick Dick Giordano, he kills it, and the story is much better by Jerry Conway in this, and so you have the characters. Let's see here. Let me go back and try to go back because I forgot the main character to write it down to announce who the main character is. And I see it, and is he listed here? You're my greatest student. Oh, where is he? I can't see the name. Master Key dies. Doggone it. And of course, it's a dojo story where the master dies and the student is, trying to avenge the teacher. And so anyway, it is just one of those typical stories. But anyway, I can't find his name right now. But Lin Sun. Lin Sun is the name of the main character. And then you have the brother here, A. Brown, who is also part of the same dojo as Lin Sun, and then also Robert Diamond. And the three of them become the Sons of the Tiger. And this is where Lin Sun gets the amulet from the Master Key, and gives him the tiger amulet. And they become three. The three of them together become the Sons of the Tiger. And so the Sons of the Tiger is an ongoing story that goes through most of the magazines. And this is a pretty good story. And again, as I said, Dick Giordano, the action in it is really well done. Very well done, as a matter of fact, as you can see. And I really enjoyed reading through some of this. And yeah, Dick Giordano just smashes it. This is beautiful. So anyway, and that is the last of it. And then you go into the second, or issue number 2. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to get ready to wrap up the show and change from document cam to face cam here. Well, I appreciate you guys joining me today on Two Ski Geeks. I'm sorry I've been away, and I say that every time because I hate to waste you guys' time with just showing comic books or whatever without having a really good theme. It's cool to show you what my collection and the things that I bought in, because I can do that all the time because I have books and magazines and figures coming in all the time. But I don't want to sit up and just like brag to you about the stuff that I bought and things that I found and things of that nature. I would really like to try to inspire you with the content of why I love comic books. I am Brother John Michael, who will join with me, I believe, next time. And he's got a sob story to tell regarding some lost books after he went to a comic book show this past weekend. And I'll let him tell the story. I felt bad for my brother But I'll just say don't do what he did or try not to, and we'll leave it at that. But for now, thank you for joining us on Two Ski Geeks. Please like and subscribe to our channel. I hope you really found today's content worth your while. Uh, get into some of these deadly hands of Kung Fu, or the Master of Kung Fu, or Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. Um, Doug Mitch and Paul Gulacy. Gulacy, how you want to pronounce it. Paul Gulacy is a phenomenal artist, one of my favorite artists of all time. In particular, his artwork on Master Shang-Chi, Master Kung Fu. Those books by Gulacy are just amazing. And so that was one of the reasons why I bought this Deadly Hands of Kung Fu and Deadly Hands of Kung Fu omnibus, as well as the magazines. So I hope you're inspired to try to find some of this stuff on your own, and hope you stay geeked up like I did. In fact, too ski geeked up, and hope you have a great day. We'll holler at you soon. Peace.